First of all, I'm Jack Jokums, and I'm thankful that you asked me to come in and tell you a little bit about my past in Minonk. Uh, my name is, of course, again, is Jack Jokums. I was born in Minonk. I was raised in Minonk. I went to the elementary school, which a lot of you kids went to, the Minonk Elementary School. I went to high school in Minonk, and then I went to college and came back and was a teacher in Minonk and also a counselor and a coach. In fact, I probably know a lot of your grandparents uh, because they went through school when I was teaching or when I was the counselor. So it's a real pleasure to be here today. Uh, Going back, they want to run you back to maybe 70 years, 70, 80 years. We're going to back up here. And usually everybody wants to go ahead, but we're going to back up to the late 1930s and the early 1940s when I was a young boy growing up in this community, and it was centered a lot on family and church. Seemed to be the things that were important to us, very important to us. And my world was kind of at first was kind of a 4 block area that I was able to move around in. So it wasn't that I traveled all over Minonk even when I was a child. And one of the things that I, of course, was close to was the church, and within that 4 block region, downtown. I was very close to downtown, and also I was close to the library. And my dad would often take me in the library with him, and of course we would start talking a little bit, and then I would hear the shh from the lady who was in charge, the librarian, and that was always something that was interesting to us because I had 2 sisters who also came with me to the library, and we liked to talk, and so got into a few problems with Dad on that end of the spectrum. We lived on the east side of the tracks, which that's what they called us, the people on the east side of the tracks. There were 2 railroads that went through our town. There was a Illinois Central Railroad, which went north and south, and the Santa Fe train tracks, which went east and west, and I was a half a block from each one of those. So I heard a lot of trains during the night, and I was always told, Jack, be careful of the trains when you go any place. But usually they had a loud whistle, and so it wasn't something that I had to worry too much about. But it was kind of interesting that I was that close to town, and when I was young and got to go uptown, it was a lot different than it is now. There's a lot of there were a lot of stores. Like we had 4 or 5 uh, grocery stores. We had 4 or 5 places that sold cars. We had a lot of little shops, and so everything could be gotten in Minonk. We didn't go out of town. In fact, I probably didn't go out of town until I was probably in the 8th grade. Got to go out of town with my dad maybe once a month if it rained and he got off work. And so a lot of the things were done at home and around the neighborhood. And I spent a lot of time as a boy in the neighborhood, just being with people, with the guys around and the girls around that neighborhood. When I got to the 8th grade, my world got a little bigger because I was 7 blocks from the grade school, and so we had a pattern that we walked every morning. We did a certain place. We went across the tracks to the depot, the Long Central Depot, and then there was a place where they stored animals. While the train was waiting to pick them up, we went by there and then went to school, and it seemed like a new world to me when I got to the elementary school because I met more people and became more involved in things that I didn't get at home. Some of the things that we did as a kid, it was kind of interesting because you do some of the same things that we did. We played tag, and we played hide go seek, and of course that was 2 of the big ones. But then we also had some things that I'm not sure that maybe you played. Anti-eye over. If some of you played it, where all you needed was a ball on a shed, and you kids now can Google that, and you'll see what it's all about. You don't rather than me telling you about it. We also played hopscotch. We did a lot of things, kick the can, uh, and so it wasn't one of those deals where you got up in the morning and you says, I don't know what I'm going to do. There's nothing to do, because we made things up to do, and that's where it was fun, because the neighbors would all gather and we would have our fun time together doing those things. Also, one of the things that I remember so distinctly, which I'm sure you don't play now, are marbles. We draw a big circle in the alley on the cinders, and everybody would bring their bag of marbles, and we would throw some marbles into the center, and then we all had a shooter, and then we would play and see who could get their marbles knocked out of the circle, and that was a lot of fun for us at that time. Also, we did a lot of hide and seek, like you do now, of course. Times we did a lot of sledding. We slid down a hill, which is only half a block from my house. We seemed like it was a mile high, but it was really wasn't very high now that I look at it. But that was a big thing to do during the winter times, as well as also during the summer times. We would do a lot of roller skating, and I did have a scooter, but there wasn't any motor on it. The motor for my scooter was my left leg or my right leg. Some of the things we had the opportunity to do, we did have a theater, which was kind of neat in town. It would cost a nickel to go to the theater. I didn't get to go to the theater until my sisters got old enough, and they would pay my way, because my dad was only making like $25, 25 cents an hour, and so he didn't have money to send me to the theater. And so I would use the old technique of crying, and then my sisters would take me to the theater, and I thought that was a great deal. In town, like you said, our main thing, you go through town, there's store after store after store, lots of people. In fact, Minonk was around 3,000 people when I was a young boy, and it's now around 2,200, but it was very interesting things happening uptown, a lot of things to do, a lot of places to go, and we oftentimes, Saturday night was a night when our families would park their cars up on Main Street, because you had to park them ahead of time or somebody would get your parking spot. And then we would sit on Main Street and watch the people go by, or we'd go in the streets and talk, and then get our popcorn at Prince's Sweet Shop. So you had a popcorn machine on the outside. So that was an interesting time in my life, and it was a lot of fun. We had carnivals, as you can't believe, carnivals that would take up maybe 6 or 7 blocks uptown rather than just 1 or 2 blocks. And circuses, one thing was nice about the circus, it was only about a block from my house or 2. As I got into school, and I got into probably the 6th grade, Dad and Mom said, maybe you ought to try to find a job, part-time job. And so I looked around for jobs, and of course there were a number of things we could do. We could scoop snow during the winter time. We could mow some yards for people, and we could also do some things like wash windows uptown for people, for different businesses, and they would pay us a little bit of money. And I was had the job. My biggest job was I was haul the paper around town. I had 104 customers. I was the only carrier, so I had to get up like at 5 in the morning so I could get to school. And my dad went to work usually about 6, so he didn't take me around. And I went from one end of town to another, north, south, east, and west, and had everybody. But boy, was it fun on Christmas time, because I got all kinds of presents from the people as I went around on that day. Dad never would take me because he couldn't, because he had to work, but he would take me on Sunday because he wanted me to get to church. Also, when I was a young boy, in fact, probably in the same ages as you kids are, I had a lot of experience of being around older people, and I learned a lot from the older people, and I got to remember to always listen to them, to what they had to say, and to tell about their past when they were kids, and that was interesting. And then I watched, as I was in Minonk, the kids growing up, my own children, and then the children in town now, as I see the things that they did, what I did, some of the fun times. And we don't like to talk about the things where we got in trouble once in a while, so it was a big joke at our house that if you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home. So what happened at school, you left at school. And back then they usually didn't call the parents, and they got involved in that. One of the things you might some of you might know me by, probably wouldn't know me on the street today. You might know me by the fact of I've announced the football games at the high school since probably 1982, and so you might have heard my voice on there. You might have watched the Parade of Lights, which my family organized back in '84. So we got involved in that, and I'm sure that all of you have been down Main Street or wherever you watch the parade and watch it still today. My biggest thing for you to do, I think, is ask you to do is that look to the older people, look to your grandma and grandpas and your parents, and find out what they did in their lives that were so important to them and to you back then. And you'll learn a lot from them and different ideas and different thoughts and ways you should live, and also the things that they did when they were young. I've had a book which is called The Tales from the Trees. I'm sure they have it here at the library. It's a story about Minonk. And I know that probably when you're in the 6th grade or 7th grade, you're not interested in reading that. But sometime read that, because I finally got to read it, and it was kind of interesting because it was written by my aunt, Eileen Hayes Snyder, and she lived only about a block away from me. But she wrote it in her later years, and a very interesting book, tells you a lot about Minonk. They called Minonk was known as the good place. That's what it means. The Indians who came here called it Minonk, and Minonk means good place, a good place to live. And so sometimes you think about the fact that, oh, I'd like to get out of Minonk. I can't wait to get out of Minonk. But what always interests me is when the people come back, they always talk about when they were little, when they were kids, and what they did at reunions and class reunions and so on. And so it was so important to me to hear them talk about those things. I've been here all my life. I never ever lived anyplace else. I went to college 1 year and stayed there, and then I got married, and I commuted back and forth the rest of my college life. And so I've been in Minonk from the birth, from 1936 to 2020. And so again, I would encourage all of you to look to the past, because the past is where the future is. And one of the things also, I'm so thankful that you gave me the opportunity to come into your presence and be a part of your life, because had always enjoyed being around students, being around kids, and being around the younger people. In fact, my wife often tells me that sometimes you act like a kid. And that's all right, because I like to relate to the younger people, because they keep me young, and I can get some information to them. So enjoy your day. Have a great time. Remember, you got a lot ahead of you. Do what you can do the best you can do, and also get the education or get a job someplace and find a career that fits you the most, and just enjoy Minonk, or the town that you might be from in the area. And I appreciate the library for asking me to come in today. And if I ever see you on the street and I wave, you'll know it's the gray-haired guy walking down the street by Meyer Jocum's agency, if you happen to see me or you hear me out at the ball game.